Welcome to the first ever official IBL podcast. I am your host for this one, Pony Rocket League, and I'm joined by Giant Lizard Gecko. Hello, Gecko.
Hello.
And I am also joined by the one and only Mass Marvelous. Hello, Mass.
Hello.
All right. I think we just get right into it then. We have just finished Market. Congratulations, everyone, for making through it. We are all very excited to be on the tail end of that. And just to start us off, I think we can talk about our best performers in the market. I'm curious to hear what Gecko you have to say.
One of the first teams I want to talk about is the Syndicate. They started out market with a very aggressive strategy of just going in high on all the players that they wanted. And this strategy may have seemed questionable at first because they ended up losing one of those players. But in reality, it gave them great flexibility to be able to adapt and flex their team into what they needed later on in the market.
Yeah, Fui, for honestly not even all that much. Fui got bid up really high really early. And then, surrounded by Gray, Bed, Control Z, and Demers, I don't know, that's definitely as strong as last season. If not, we'll see how they do.
Yeah, Syndicate's a very comparable skill level to last season, I think. It'll be similar at the very minimum.
They were an excellent team last season, and I would say that the skill is a lot more evenly distributed this season, so I think that leaves them open for potentially a very good run this season, especially with how well the team knows each other.
All right, Mass, who do you have?
Impact from a similar thread kind of went for very specific players right off the get-go and just committed to them for the rest of the market with players like Zenrol, Delano, ePrince. And unlike Syndicate, they didn't start off by bidding incredibly high on these players. They actually were in the few hundreds and then they got driven up later. And they actually managed to hold on to all of them, just barely within budget, I believe. I don't think they were able to stretch it any further if any players had upbid what they had. Zenrol, Delano, Yam. Impact definitely went into the market with the goals, and I think that they came out one of the most successful teams in market because they got exactly what they were looking for.
Yeah, they got basically what they were looking for, and Impact has been a very strong A-League for a couple seasons now, so that's really the best that you can look for when you're a team that's been so successful for so long. You don't really need to rock the boat too much, you just need to get what you want.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how they perform compared to. Obviously, they had the season MVP last season, so I'm curious to see how they perform without Kami on the team. But they still have an incredibly strong team, despite not having Kami anymore.
I was really expecting them to bring up revolvers, and I'm really glad that they did. I think it allowed them to have a lot of flexibility in market, and I mean that's from the player of fours that I'm seeing, at least on the roster spreadsheet. Zenrol, Delano, Yam, and revolvers. I think it's just a really strong roster that doesn't have a lot of weaknesses.
Yeah, Pony, do you have any teams that you want to talk about?
Oh my goodness, I thought you'd never ask. First team I wanted to talk about actually was Tavern. Tavern going for a very bold strategy in market. Floofy Flame at a total of 3,000 points by the end of market.
Yeah.
Floofy Flame's price is ridiculous. I thought Apple 2500 was insane, but Floofy Flame is going for an entire A-League cost plus 500 mixed use points.
Yeah, Tavern knowing no limits. And I mean, on top of that, getting Kelsey, Attack Bread, Red 2, I think very luckily not going for all that much money in the owner pricing, and then bringing up Seday's. I mean, that is definitely a roster I would be proud of after market.
Yeah, has a lot of potential. They have 3/4 of the team that went to the finals last season. Aces up, so that's a really good base to build off of, and then they added Red and Seday's in there, and it's going to be very, very strong potentially.
Season 4 feels like so long ago. I didn't even connect the idea that was basically Aces up. All right, Gecko, give us another team. Who else you got for best performers in market?
I have a little bit of a weird team, and I'm going to say Riptide here. I think Riptide was a team which ended up taking an approach that not necessarily the market is the big thing I want to talk about, but the trades that they had leading up to market to set themselves up in a absolutely amazing position. They started out with a little bit less money than most teams in market, especially with taking over Aces Up, a team that spent heavy last season, and they were able to trade to secure Scouse, one of the premier IGLs in the league, and Nudley, who is already covered by another team. And this ends up opening up the team to be able to do so much more, especially after through farther trades, they basically managed to clear all the contracts that they were covering in those trades to be able to get Scouse and Nudley. And because of that, they were able to get deep. One of the top players in the league didn't play last season, but should have very great potential. And we know what Scouse can do with basically any roster.
Yeah, even before the season started, I had been looking at Celestine as an option for my team. But I mean, Celestine on a 2-season, essentially free contract, thanks to Divine Rising, I think is going to be a lot stronger than many people realize. But
yeah,
I could be wrong. We'll see. We'll see.
Season removed, it might be a little bit slow to start, but we saw B League in season 3, I believe, was a dominant force.
All right, then over to Mass with your we'll let you do 2 in a row.
Okay. Well, I want to start off with my absolute favorite performer in the market. Party Animals are a new team on the block, and they were not shy at all in the market. They were going after everyone. They at one point they had like 14 people in their bidding all at once. That they were not holding back at all despite being a new team. And they came out of the market with a phenomenal team as well. They have Shano, Trapdoor, Bigfoot, Something Neon, Ziz2, and Blurry on their team. Having 6 players, all of them can hold their own in a fight. All 6 of them are good players. Shano, Bigfoot, and Neon all have the ability to hold star player roles if they want to. I feel like this is one of the most exciting teams going into the season, not only because they're a brand new team, but just because of how stacked their roster is looking.
Yeah, and also they're pulling from the Night Vision roster last season that won the B League. They've been a dominant force in the B League for a while. They're finally really making an appearance in A League under a different name now. And that's going to really open up a roster which could do a lot of damage. We saw what happens when you bring a B League up to A League last season with the Tavern. And they've just done that and also added Bigfoot to that roster, who has been a successful A-leaguer for many seasons now.
I think one thing that Party Animals teaches me is just how much quality is stuck in B League. There's just so many good players that are completely viable A-League players and might even thrive in A-League, but might just not have had their chance yet.
And as for a second team I found very interesting in the market, the Arcane, not necessarily because of how aggressive they were in the market, but because of the exact opposite. They did not get a lot of players out of the market at all. A lot of their players are cheap players. They are draft players. Their most expensive player is Pokemon Master at 840 points. After that, they drafted 3 other players: Crungy 370, Tausi 160, and Grudge for 80. They did not spend a lot on the market at all. Their A-League is worth under 2,000 points when we have other A-Leagues that are going for well over 3,000. So I'm curious, just because of how passive Arcane is playing, what their plans are.
I think for Arcane, they are just really betting on a lot of these underdogs to perform. I think they see the quality of some of their picks like Boilera and Dr. Legend, and they saw what Crystal was able to do last season. They saw Crungy in the B League and Pokemon Masters similarly in the B League. And I think it's kind of like a shot glass to tavern situation where Arcane's really betting on a lot of these players to turn good.
I mean, Arcane's trying to build an identity around being the underdog team in A-League. Last season, their team fell apart early on. They brought in tons of players who have shown success in competitive Battle Box, but have not yet made an appearance in IBL, brought them into the A-League, and they were very nearly a playoff team. And they're really leaning into that identity again this season, I feel like.
All right, well then I guess I'll close this off with one last team. I think Divine Rising had a very sneakily good market. Divine Rising did not have a lot of work to do in market. They already had X-Apple on a multi-season 2,500 contract, but definitely needed to find support for Apple, and I really think that they did that. They completely cleared house. Sorry, Gecko. But in turn got Mind Lover for 600, which I think is an absolute steal, probably one of the best deals in this whole market. Then they had Adjacent on a draft pick, Sniper of Kills brought up from the B League, and then Fauna Aardvark. And I think that that's going to be a lot of great support for Apple this season. I'm excited to see how they play.
I didn't actually notice how insane Divine Rising's roster is looking. These are insane pickups for having Apple at 2,500.
They really did what Chan has excelled at last season and this season, in finding the players that are getting overlooked in market and bringing them in and putting them in A-League position around his star of Apple. Last season, you saw Nudley performed well. Jojo, before getting banned, was a very good performer. And it's Sniper Once again, a player that Chang got for super cheap last season, did amazing in B-League. Saru, similar story. And I think Divine Rising is going to be very successful this season.
So now I think we should move on to what we think the playoff picture is. I know it's early, but I think we can make some early predictions. I think let's start with Alpine. Impact, what are we thinking?
Impact, despite not having Kami this season, I think is going to be a heavy playoff contender, if not one of the favorites from the Alpine division. Zenrul, Delano, Yam, and Revolvers, all four of them are star player potential on a team like Impact. I'd be really surprised if they don't make playoffs, but anything is possible.
Yeah, and we saw a team very similar to this in Season 3 squeak out the 8 seed, and now they just have another 2 seasons of experience under their belt. I would be shocked to see them get knocked out after they've really gotten their footing in the league as a perennial contender, I would say.
All right. And then Party Animals, what do we think?
Party Animals, they look very strong. I would draw connections to last season's Tavern, where it's lots of B-Leaguers getting their first real chance in A-League, and there's a good chance that they make playoffs. There's also an outlying chance that they just miss out on playoffs, so I would put them as a strong contender for playoffs, but hard to guarantee that they'll be in, especially with this stacked of a field this season.
Party Animals, I feel like, is a team that has the potential to exceed Impact and also the potential to fall flat. It is as Gecko mentioned, Party Animals consists of a lot of players that are having either their first season in A-League, or they are going to be playing with players that are new in the A-League because it is so filled with rookies. I think that the team is stacked with talent, and I think it has the potential to be a very high seed team. What can go wrong for them, I think, is if the chemistry isn't there. I feel like that is the only place Party Animals can fall flat with how strong their players are.
Yeah, I would be surprised if the chemistry struggles after all they won the B-League. But if like the higher level competition and really struggling starts getting to the team, then that's where the chemistry could start struggling, and then the team could really fall flat.
All right. Well, then on to Rat Tactics. What are we thinking? Got to really think about this one.
Uh,
Hate this
Playoff
team.
outlier doesn't stand a chance. Red Tactics, I feel like, is a very strong playoff contender. They have the Max Koi duo, which is Season 1 and Season 2 MVP put together. The one thing that I would put holding back this team is Koi hasn't made a playoffs since Season 2, and that could be something to look at with this team, where maybe there is something the team would need to work on to make sure that the team finally gets over the hump, as oftentimes Koi has been there, and the supporting cast has struggled to support Koi to a level where they make playoffs.
Koi's got a bit of a curse following him.
Mm-hmm.
I think that my team has a very good shot, no bias. I think it's kind of like a very similar team to Season 4 Nocturnal, which did very strong, even though it didn't work out for sort of chemistry reasons. We have like a very strong range player in Mass and a strong sorted in QA. And I think with the kind of trio of names, Psychans and Winters, it's going to be a bit of a stronger backbone to the team. So I'm really excited about this season for my team. No bias, but I think we are definitely playoff contenders. So do you guys want to talk about Serpentine now? Hey, editing pony here. Just wanted to make a quick clarification before we get into Serpentine. Sparky has since signed to Serpent's B-League, so keep that in mind as we're talking about Serpentine.
Serpentine is another strong playoff contender from the Alpine division, with Kubo obviously as their star player going for 1840 in the market, and then Sparky and Lux coming in as second frags, along with Manzo and Kabelek. And as potential healer roles, I don't know if Kabelek will be playing healer roles or if Manzo will be playing healer roles this season. Both of them were healers last season.
Yeah, I think the only thing Serpentine might have holding them back is finding whether or not Sparky or Lux can be proven second frags that can have the same output as Serpentine might need to make a playoff run. But I definitely see Serpentine as a good playoff team.
Yeah, Serpentine's really taking a big diversion from what they've done with their core for the past few seasons. Or not a big diversion, but there is a notable missing factor in Mindlover. Mindlover was a player that's been there from Season 1, been a very stable factor, and now they're really working on building a team post Mindlover, and it will be interesting to see how that plays out for them.
All right, then we can move on to the Arid division, where we start with Close Combat.
Close Combat is a team where I could see them struggling to make playoffs. The biggest factor that you have to consider when looking at Close Combat is very, very little experience. They have the theoretical mechanical skill, but with teams like this that we've seen without much experience, but in BattleBox specifically, they tend to struggle. Think back to Strikers. They have more mechanical skill than Strikers, but Strikers really couldn't find any momentum in the league, even impact in their first season in the league. They just barely squeaked into playoffs, and I would say that the league this season is even stronger than it was when Impact entered.
And when you compare them to teams like Serpentine and Impact that have these veterans on their roster that have played in the league for multiple seasons, they not only probably fall short in experience, but just the firepower on teams like Impact and Serpentine is going to be hard to overcome even with experience. If they're going to make playoffs, it's going to be a very difficult climb. That being said, it can be done. They're just going to have to put in a lot of work for it.
Yeah, I think if this team's going to make playoffs, it's going to have to come from like a very group effort type of situation. But yeah, Crystal Fang, Triple Lion, Kitty Dragon, Not Hydra, and Zin, all draft picks, except for, well, even Zin's a draft pick, technically using a draft pick on the owner. I definitely see them as playoff outsiders as of now, but that's something I think could quickly change as we get to know Close Combat as a team.
I did not realize that Close Combat was a team of 5 draft picks. That's insane.
Mm-hmm.
So moving on to Divine Rising, now in the Arid division. What are we thinking?
This is my former team. They have X-Apple, who's going to put up numbers basically no matter her situation. And just for that alone, they're going to be contenders in this league. They have a very strong supporting cast. This is where Mind Lover ended up. And then they're bringing up Sniper of Kills. And very late on, they ended up bringing in Fawn. And that should give the A-League plenty of firepower. Not to mention their new draft pick, Adjacent, who has been very strong historically in Island tournaments, doesn't have any IBL experience. But with a team like this, there should be no issues teaching Adjacent the ropes of IBL.
And especially when you do Divine Rising on a side-by-side comparison to their Season 4 team versus their Season 5 team, their Season 4 team made playoffs, partially because of an absolutely inhuman effort from Apple. But when you compare these two teams together, Season 5 Divine Rising does look stronger than Season 4 Divine Rising, and therefore it would be reasonable to think that Divine Rising should make playoffs this season. And just looking at it, as Gecko pointed out, Apple, Mind Lover, Adjacent, Sniper, Fawn, it's a strong team, and with the exception of Adjacent, these players know how to play BattleBox. Okay, wait, that sounds kind of like a big Adjacent. I meant Adjacent was new to IBL.
I might leave that in just for fun. Then I guess we can move on to talk about Nova then.
Nova might make playoffs, might not. Okay. Nova
outside contender. Really struggle seeing this team making playoffs.
I don't know,
they
man.
Have this Kuwell person. Don't know who that is.
JFeg, I think it was a draft pick next season. I don't know. It's a risky play, man. Nova, the returning champions of the A-League last season, have 3 players returning. Cool, Tormund, and JFeg. They should be a lock for playoffs this season. We don't know who their 4th player is going to be quite yet. But just with the core of Cool, Tor, and JFeg, there shouldn't be too much difficulty with them locking in playoffs. We will have to wait to see what their 4th player can contribute to the team, but it's looking pretty safe for them so far.
Yeah, Nova was absolutely dominant last season. Really, I don't think it matters too much who their 4th is on if they make playoffs. It really more matters on if they're going to be looking to reclaim their title for a 2nd consecutive season.
All right, and then that will bring us right over to the Arcane.
The Arcane, this is another team I could see struggling to make playoffs. They brought in a ton of players with very little experience, kind of similar to a history that they're trying to make for themselves of really giving new players a chance in the league. Last season, it worked out for them decently well. They were fairly close to playoffs. This season, it's a very different league. It's very competitive. It's different players now on the roster, and we'll have to see if they can compete. But for the time being, it's very hard to look at this roster and say that they have a very strong chance against other teams. But they could surprise us. They did last season.
Arcane is bringing in a lot of B-Leaguers as well. Pokemon played in B-League last season. Crunchy is being brought up from the Arcane Academy. And then Boilera and Dr. Legend both being draft picks. The team has a lot of players that don't have experience with the A-League, or in their experience with the A-League, such as Crystally, they didn't have a strong team or a strong performance in the previous season to really know what to expect from them quite yet. I think the team definitely has potential to make playoffs. That being said, compared to the experience or the skill level on the other teams, it's going to be another uphill battle for this team.
Yeah, and I know that we're not talking about B League this week, but the decision to, I know I trust Arcane, but the decision to leave Awesome B League and, over some of the A Leaguers, I mean, I don't want to call out people by names, but I think that it's an interesting decision, and I'm a little curious how it'll pay off for them. I'm not sure it was the right call.
I do definitely think it caught everybody off guard to see Colossum heading to the B League, especially he's the first draft pick of the Season 5 draft pool. So to see him being put into the B League, a lot of people were expecting him to be in A League. A lot of people were curious to see how he would perform against IBL opponents. So seeing him in B League this season, maybe he has a B League MVP performance in a B League team.
So that brings us over to Coastal Division, where we start with Fem.
So Femme Fatales is definitely a contender for playoffs this season. They are finally bringing Marie back into the fray after skipping last season. Caution Tape is a very strong player. Behavior is a very strong player. Gecko there to fill in some of the support roles as well. This team is a very strong team mechanically. I think this team definitely has the ability to make playoffs. They have the ability to make playoffs by a very decent margin, I think, as well, if they can get all of their pieces sorted. I think the one way this team falls apart is somehow if chemistry doesn't work, but I don't see that happening. This team, everyone's familiar with one another. This team should be in the playoffs, I believe.
Yeah, going to talk about my team for a bit, so just be warned, there may be some bias. Looking at Caution Tape last season, he was the only proper A-League player who played the entire A-League season to have a higher carry percentage than Apple, which really shows the level at which Caution can play at, even when not given a ton of support. This season, I would say Caution has quite a bit more support added to the roster, and I think that we can go very far. The one issue that I could really see with our team is really just working and making sure that we're up to speed with IBL metas and such, as Marie hasn't played in an entire season. Caution and B were on a Femme Fatales, which struggled last season, and I am new to the roster, so it may take a little bit of getting used to playing with these players compared to my last team.
All right. Well, then we'll get right over to Hang 10.
Okay, Hang 10. This is another team which is a playoff contender. They have Duzum plus Snaz. Duzum, some would argue, is the IBL GOAT, and that is going to obviously provide lots of help. Snaz is a season out of the league, but we've seen him be very successful with cooking with Greece in the first 3 seasons. So we can expect Snaz will make a pretty decent return to the league. The question marks start to show up with Twitchy and Antfrost. Twitchy had last season with Hang 10, which really just the roster fell apart, and it will be a season of catching back up to speed for Twitchy. And Antfrost is new to the league. We don't really know how well Antfrost will perform, but we're certain that this team will be able to teach Antfrost the ropes of IBL, and everything goes well. Snaz and Twitchy pick back up their Season 3 form, and Antfrost adapts well. But don't be surprised to see this team in playoffs.
I definitely think a lot of Hang 10's performance is going to hinge off of how much Duzum and Snaz can put up a mechanical performance. I am not entirely sure where Antfrost lies mechanically compared to most IBL players. Twitchy typically plays support roles in all of his history, I believe. So yeah. Antfrost is probably going to be playing some sort of third frag role, maybe a gadgeteer kind of role. I feel like a lot of it's going to hinge on Duzum and Snaz's ability to put up numbers, though.
Then the next team in the Coastal Division, Riptide.
Riptide is another playoffs contender. They obviously have Deep at the forefront of their roster, going for 2,000 points in the market. A very strong player. Scouse, another veteran in the league, known very well for his strategies that he's probably going to be bringing to the A-League as well. Dudley, another strong performer, is going to be doing a lot of the second fragging roles to Deep as well, I assume. Nathan's going to be playing a lot of the healing roles, and Celestine, making a return from Season 3, was on the Sirens then, is going to have to be caught up to speed with the IBL, but has the potential to be another strong fragger on the team.
Yeah, I would say this team, I see a lot of potential with the team. Obviously, you have the Scout strats, which with any team, I feel like will be very successful. You add that with a clear top frag in deep, Nudley, who is looking to make a big leap from season 4, where she was a rookie, and I think that with Scouse being very well accomplished, which with catching players up to the league, Nudley and Celestine will make huge leaps in their performance.
Yeah, I think the only question with this team is whether or not Deep can put up, top A-League fragger numbers. I definitely have faith in Deep to do that, and I think Riptide has a very, very good shot at making playoffs this season.
Yeah, there is the question to consider where Deep has never played a true top frag role. In season 3, played on Nova with Cool. In season 2, played on Nocturnal with Koi. In season 1, Deep was still getting acclimated to the league and wasn't necessarily clear top frag, but was right up there with Cody and Behavior.
And that brings us to the last team of the Coastal Division, Donut Kingdom.
Donut Kingdom, I think, is an absolute clear lock for playoffs. They are adding to the Brunted Eevees Grand Core Bamsey, the Season 4 B-League MVP. And really, I don't see how this team, which won its division last season, could miss playoffs this season. They have Brunted, someone who, since the start of the league, has always been up there in conversations for best player in the league. Eevees was the Season 3 champion and has continued to roll with that momentum. And Bamsey had possibly one of the most dominant B-League seasons we've seen by any player.
And when you put Donut Kingdom at a side-by-side comparison to their Season 4 roster, it does look like they've done nothing but get upgraded. And to your point, they won their division last season. Unless something goes catastrophically wrong, this team should be even better than last season. They are in contender not only for playoffs, but for a title this season, I would say. Every player on their team is incredibly powerful. Brenton and Eevees is a brilliant duo. Blackshon and Bamsey are both incredible fraggers. Dabmaster's there to play some more of the support roles for the team. It's a really strong team all around.
Yeah, this is definitely a team that I have in my potential to win the season group, I would say. Definitely one to keep an eye on.
The one issue that I would say that this team could potentially have is the healer role. I don't think any player on the team is particularly experienced with healer, and when they have it's tend to be accompanied with a slight underperformance of the team. Eevees played healer in season 2 with Nocturnal, a roster we really expected to be very successful, and they were, but they didn't quite win the league. And Brunted played healer in season 3 a bit for Cooking with Grease, and that was the worst ever performance of that franchise.
And that'll bring us over to the Volcanic Division, and starting with the Droogs.
Droogs is a team that is probably going to have difficulty making playoffs this season, despite the amount of experience that this roster has. Their newest player being Bikers, who is on his second season by this point. The team lacks a lot of mechanical strength compared to other teams in the IBL this season, I'd say. Their strongest fragger is probably going to be Cat, who went for 1,600 during the market this season. But outside of that, it's probably going to be players like Alex, Kippy, maybe King Luke that are going to be their next frags. Skate maybe in support roles. Actually, Skate does have the ability to frag out if he wants to. But I don't know if any of them have the ability to put up as strong of a second frag role as, say, on a team like Impact, where Zenral and Delano either can be a top fragger if they want.
Yeah, and adding on to that, I do feel like that there are potential issues just in the roster with a lot of the players kind of being on a little bit of a downturn in their career or lacking some experience. Alex is very far off from the season 2 Rat Tactics champion form in last season, and Skate has been kind of bouncing around teams for a bit, kind of struggling to get that consistency in that we see a lot of top players have with consistent teams and teammates. And that could cause some issues with just comfortability for the team and the players really performing up to the potential that we know that they've been able to perform at before.
Yeah, this is a team that I definitely worry about their chemistry. I think that, if all things are going right for this team, that they could definitely be strong in their own right. I think that, they have quite a few very capable players on their team. I do worry, though, if they start to lose a couple rounds, what that VC starts to look like. So for now, keep keeping Droogs as playoff outsiders, but I definitely think it's possible for them to get there. And with that, we can move on to the Syndicate.
The Syndicate is going to be a playoff lock this season, I feel like. If they don't make playoffs, something has gone very wrong for them. They were the 5th seed last season. It's a fairly similar looking roster this season. There's a few changes, most notably Sherpa got traded away. But they have Fui, Gray, Control Z, Demers, and Bed Inspector. Gray and Bed being the 2 new players on the roster, and both of them being players that we know have great potential. Bed won B-League last season, and Gray was part of the Donut Kingdom roster, which won their division. So I see no issues with firepower. They have the experience. Really, they've just gotten better every single season as a roster.
Syndicate is very similar to Season 4 in that I feel like they are the go-to team when you think about a team where any player on their team has the ability to change the way a game goes. And I feel like it is the exact same this season with even stronger players. All 5 of the players on their team, you can put in a 1v2 scenario and they can pull something out. I feel like this team is another team where I could see winning the IBL this season.
All right, and with that, I think we can move on to the Tavern now.
The Tavern is another team looking like an A-League lock for this season. Floofy Flame is going for 2,920 points, the most expensive the most expensive player I think we've ever seen in IBL history.
Not
Kelsey
Kami was more last season.
Oh, really? What was Kami's price?
It was in the 3,000s. I remember that.
Kami went for 3,090. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, 3,090.
So Floofy was actually the second most expensive player in IBL history. Kelsey and Attack Bread are both also returning this season with Floofy. The 3 of them aren't on Aces Up anymore, but they are still together this time on Tavern. The only difference for this core is that instead of Rotom and Prince, they are switching them out for Sadaze and Red 2. I don't know if it is going to be as strong as it was last season. That being said, Aces Up was a ridiculous powerhouse last season, and I still think that it will be enough to push them into playoffs and towards a title.
Yeah, this team is looking exceptionally strong in terms of its potential. We know that they've worked out before with Aces Up, and the league, I would say the distribution of skill is slightly wider this season, so that really could open up a window for them, even if you would argue that maybe it's a slight downgrade in confirmed talent this team has, with 2 B-League players moving up to A-League for the first time this season.
And that leaves us, last but not least, with Ultraviolet.
Ultraviolet is another team which very likely could end up making playoffs. They have Gizzy Mizzy, last season's healer of the season, and Rotom and Prince, the other 2 players from that Aces Up roster who went all the way to the finals to lose. And they add that in with Sherpa, who has shown great success with the Syndicate roster. And then they bring in a draft prospect of Orlix. This roster is really, really strong. They don't have the full experience of playing as a full roster, and that's the one thing that you could argue could hold them back. Even given that, seeing this team miss playoffs would basically only come on the basis of a complete chemistry collapse, or really just other teams of similar caliber just working out slightly better than them.
Ultraviolet, I think, are a very similar team to Syndicate in that their players all have the ability to put up numbers individually. I do not know much about Orlix, them being a new prospect this season. I think, as Gecko mentioned, the only thing that could go wrong for this team is if the players don't mesh well together. In terms of mechanics, I think that this is a team that should probably be making playoffs.
Completely stole my point about it being a similar team to Syndicate. Oh my god, my jaw dropped.
There's a reason why you 2 are owners together.
Yeah. Well, I think that about does it for the playoff talk. Let's get right into the week 1 action. Just predicting these A-League games for week 1. Impact versus the Tavern. What are we thinking?
I would have to go with the Tavern here in this game. I think The Tavern, they're coming back with the Aces Up core, and I think that will leave them in a very good spot right at the start of the season, even going up against other top A-League rosters.
I also agree with the Tavern pick as them beating Impact. Impact has suffered the fact that they don't have Kami this season. The Tavern is basically Aces Up again with some changes in who their fourth player is going to be. I think that due to the experience the Tavern have together, Impact also has experience together, but I think Tavern beats them out in mechanics.
Yeah, I think I'm also going to say Tavern. It's a slightly more, I think it's a lot closer than, a 3-0 sweep of us here on the podcast saying, Tavern, but I think it's going to be a very close game. Impact's definitely going to take a lot of rounds, probably a map as well. But yeah, I think Tavern does just have that edge in terms of talent. So then we move on to Party Animals versus Droogs.
Given our discussion previously about which teams we think are going to make playoffs, I think it's to be expected that Party Animals is probably the favorite for this matchup. They have a ridiculous amount of actual firepower on their team. The only thing that could go wrong in this matchup is if they haven't quite figured out where they mesh in the team. Droogs, on the other hand, is also a team that has to figure out how they're going to mesh. And if they can do that before Party Animals are, I think that's where their only chance of winning lies.
Yeah, I would overall agree with the Party Animals pick, especially given the fact that much of this roster is just coming off of winning the B League. I don't see them losing their first A League appearance. They're going to be very motivated. They're going to have relatively high morale going into this season. Droogs obviously could get the surprise on this roster, especially if Party Animals ends up underestimating the Droogs.
Yeah, I'm also going to say Party Animals. I think Ciano is going to have a really breakout A-League season in this season 5. I think Ciano is going to put up numbers that a lot of people might not be expecting. And I think this game or whatever game for Party Animals gets scheduled first, whatever game that happens to be, will probably be the game people realize that Ciano might be up there with some of the league's best. We are going to continue this. Just Gecko and I, Matt's unfortunately had to step out. But that does bring us on to Rat Tactics versus the Syndicate. Gecko, what are you thinking?
I would say for this game, I'm going to go with the Syndicate. I think this is a game that I would be on a heavy upset watch look for, though, with Rat Tactics taking down the Syndicate. Rat Tactics has tons of potential. The only reason why they aren't really on the same tier as the Syndicate would be just the unknown of how well that roster will mesh together.
Yeah, I think Rat Tactics has always been a team that always takes a little bit to get going. Even in their season 2 winning run, they, I believe, started 3 games without a win. So
yeah, it was a little bit of a losing streak to kick it off.
Yeah, so for the Syndicate, I think it's very fair to say that that is a roster that knows each other a lot better and will probably mesh a lot better. So I would give that game to the Syndicate as well. So then Serpentine versus Ultraviolet. What are you thinking?
This is going to be a very close game. I'm going to give the edge to Ultraviolet here. I feel like combining the core from Aces Up with a few other of the very successful teams last season should work very well for them. Really, Serpentine, they're going to have a little bit to figure out. The roster is very different from historically what they've had on their roster. And with a team that's been so stable for so long, that type of change I think will take a couple games to really set in.
I'm actually going to go with Serpentine here. I think Kubo is going to really show her worth, and I think pull an upset here. I think the supporting cast is good, and as long as they can all show up and show out, I think Serpentine has a chance of taking this. So I'm gonna disagree here. I'm gonna say Serpentine. You have anything to say on that?
I'd say yes, the supporting cast of Serpentine's good. I feel like really my big point is just the roster's new. Kubo could go crazy, just have a performance where she absolutely takes over, and the supporting cast is there enough early on that they win. But I feel like I'm going to go with the safer pick of Ultraviolet.
Understandable, completely understandable. Then we go to newcomers close combat against Impact.
This is a game where you really have to go with Impact. There's just so much unknown about close combat and how they will perform in the IBL. We know that in theory they have the potential mechanics-wise, but we really just don't know if the team will be there in terms of battle box knowledge yet.
Yeah, if close combat's going to do it, I don't think it's going to be with wins right out of the gate. I think it's going to take a little bit to get going. And so for these week 1 games especially, I think I'm going to have to go with the experience of Impact. So then Divine Rising versus Rat Tactics. I think I can start us off with this one. No bias at all. I think that Rat Tactics has the ability to take this one. I'm going to predict a Rat Tactics victory. I think that the Mass Kyo duo is going to be enough to take down Apple and Mind Lover and adjacent Sniper of Kills Fawn. I think that Rat Tactics has a very good supporting cast. So I'm going to give a slight edge to Rat Tactics, but I think it's going to be very close.
I might have to agree with you again here. Divine Rising and Rat Tactics are both in a similar predicament where it's lots of players who have not yet played with each other coming together for the first time. And I think that they're just going to struggle in their first season together. In the future, I think they could do better. It's just going to be a tough first week for both of these teams, and this will be a really big chemistry boost to whichever team pulls out the win.
So then Nova versus Serpentine.
I have to go with Nova here. Nova is going to be going into this season really as the preseason favorites. Just winning last season and bringing back 3/4 of a roster. It's really hard to see another team displacing them near the top of the league here. There is obviously tons of potential with the Serpentine roster. They have Kubo, who could always go crazy, but I think Nova will have enough to take care of business here.
Yeah, as the wise saying goes, a person who bets against Nova becomes a poor person very quickly, and I am not looking to become poor, so I would put my money on Nova to win this. I think that they are once again looking like a very strong roster and definitely looking to do it again this season. So Arcane versus Party Animals. I think this is an interesting matchup.
Yeah, this is going to be a very exciting matchup. Lots of players making their A-League debuts here. And really, I have to give the edge to Party Animals just with the B-League history that roster has. The Arcane could pull off something. Pokemon Master will get a chance to really get their revenge on the Night Vision core, but I have to go with Party Animals.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to agree. As I said before, like I think this week especially is gonna be this Yano breakout week. And that's the watch I'm keeping on it. I'm gonna say Party Animals taking down Arcane. So then the Donut Kingdom taking on Close Combat.
This is a tough first week draw for Close Combat, but Donut Kingdom has to be the roster I go with here. Donut Kingdom, obviously we're looking at this roster. This is another one of those teams that you could see just winning the entire league just from the roster alone. And week 1 against a team really trying to get their bearing in IBL, I feel like this is going to be just too big of a hill for Close Combat to climb this early.
Yeah, I was thinking the exact same thing. If I was Close Combat, I would not be very happy with this week 1 schedule, but it is what it is. I'm giving the edge to Donut Kingdom. I think it is definitely going to be a match that Close Combat can learn from. And I mean, hey, maybe it's good to get some of these harder games out of the way to learn from them and really stress test a team. Definitely giving the edge to Donut Kingdom. And then we can move on to Droogs versus Riptide.
This is an interesting game. I'm going to go with an upset here of Droogs. I feel like Riptide has their IGL scouts who really benefits from having VODs to review and really look at a team and know and really dissect their weaknesses. I feel like in the moment, this would be like a huge opportunity for Droogs to prove themselves. And I think that they're going to be able to just barely pull it off.
Yeah, I'm gonna go the other way. I'm gonna stick with probably the more popular pick. I think I'm gonna go with Riptide here. I think that this is just a very solid roster, and it's full of players who definitely are like very smart battle box players. And I think that a team like Droogs could be uniquely caught off guard by a team like that. So I'm gonna take Riptide there, but I do hear you about the Droogs pick, and I don't think that's unreasonable at all. I think this game is gonna be very close. So then we have the Syndicate facing off against Femme Fatales. That's gonna be a very good game.
As much as I hate to go against my team, I'm going to have to give the Syndicate the edge here. Really just a roster going into the season, which is looking absolutely exceptional. Another one of those teams that you could see going all the way. And them early on, still going to be looking to figure a lot of things out. And I think that the Syndicate, who is a team who has played IBL with each other very recently, is just going to be able to win.
So yeah, I'd have to agree. I think the Syndicate is going to take this one. I can't really argue against any of their strengths. I think Femme Fatales is going to have a hard time of overcoming that firepower that they do have. It's just such a strong roster, as you said. So definitely giving this one to the Syndicate. And then we will have another exciting game this week: Tavern versus Donut Kingdom.
I feel like this could very easily be a game of the week. You have Tavern looking like the aces up core with a little bit of the shot glass core added into there. And then you have Donut Kingdom, really just the Donut Kingdom core from last season, bringing up their best B-leaguer to fill in the holes, and then Dab Master also in there. And it's going to be a tough game. I'm going to give the edge to Donut Kingdom. I feel like they're going to have more familiarity with each other going into week 1 than the Tavern core.
Yeah, I mean, Donut Kingdom is, I don't know. I think that team is definitely one to just watch to win it all this season. I think that even a team as strong as the Tavern is going to really struggle against Donut Kingdom. I'm giving this one to Donut Kingdom for sure. I think that we will. I mean, maybe they have healer issues, like I think Mass brought up, or maybe you brought up before.
I think it was me.
I'll give the credit to you, just in case.
Mass doesn't need any credit. He's not here.
Yeah, he's not here anymore. He doesn't need credit. But yeah, they might have some healer issues, and that could maybe come to bite them. But I'm definitely giving this game to the Donut Kingdom. So next, we have Femme Fatales versus Divine Rising.
For this game, I'm going to believe in my team. Femme Fatales win this 8-0, easy win. But in all seriousness, I do think that this will be a close game. I'm giving the edge to Femme Fatales just on the basis that Divine Rising really is going to have a little bit to figure out with the chemistry with their new core. As far as I know, really none of these players have played a significant amount with each other going into this season. And that's going to take a lot of figuring out, especially in just 1 week, 1 to 2 weeks before this game happens, potentially. Femme Fatales, the entire roster knows each other fairly well, even though there's a lot of time that they've spent playing together in IBL.
Yeah, I'm going to personally give this one to Divine Rising. I think that that's a really good point about the composition of the roster and familiarity. I do just think that the kind of Apple and Mind Lover duo might prove to be too strong for Femme Fatales. I think this is definitely going to be a very close game. I would say personally that I would put my money on Divine Rising. So then that brings us to Hang 10 versus Nova.
Here you just have to go with Nova. It really, there's not much to say other than the fact it's Nova. Until other teams show that they can beat this Nova core, it's really hard to vote against them going into any game.
Yeah, I mean, I think this game is one that I would put on heavy upset watch. I think that Duzum has just the ability sometimes to pull wins out of nowhere. I mean, we almost saw it when he was on Rat Tactics versus Nova last season, coming 1 round away from winning a game that I don't think anyone thought Rat Tactics
Mhm.
had even a chance of winning. But I do think it might be too early, too soon for this Hang 10 roster. I would also give this game to Nova.
A little bit of a history point though. The last time Duzum on Hang 10 played Nova, Duzum beat Nova in the finals on Hang 10. So
That is true. That is very true.
it will be a little revenge tour for Nova, avenge their finals loss.
So then the last game of the week, at least on our schedule that we have here, Ultraviolet versus Hang 10. What are you thinking, Gecko?
I'm going to give this to Hang 10. I think the Snaz plus Duzum duo is incredibly strong. Twitchy is very comfortable supporting Duzum after they went on a finals run together. And I think that they're just going to be able to bring it over the line against Ultraviolet.
Yeah, this is one of those games where I feel like I just don't know, because I think it really could go either way, because I do think that Hang 10 has the better star power with Duzum and Snaz than Ultraviolet has. But I think top to bottom, like the bottom side of Ultraviolet is a lot stronger than the bottom side of Hang 10.
Mm.
Oh, I don't know. I think I'm gonna go Ultraviolet here, just due to the strength of the full roster. I think maybe they might be able to hold off a Duzum and Snaz onslaught, but I guess we'll have to see.
Yeah, we really need to see these rosters to make a fair judgment of any of them at this point. But especially in games where on paper the teams are so similar, it's really hard to call this early on.
Absolutely. And I think that can bring us to little final comments. Anything you want to talk about with the market, Gecko?
The market this season, I feel like, was very successful. There were a lot of people complaining early on there wasn't enough going on. There are some ideas that we have to combat this. One being that I've seen talked about a decent amount is shortening the bid lock time to 48 hours. But overall, the ending to market, I think, is something I'm fairly happy with. There's maybe a little bit of a steep fall off still, but I think that's just something that's going to happen in market. And I think it was a very successful market, and we're getting close to a market that is more or less able to be kept unchanged in terms of rules between seasons.
Yeah, I agree. I think the amount that each season the teams seem to be getting more and more even, at least as each season starts, really goes to show that market is at least working, hopefully.
Yeah, and the team owners have also learned a lot from season 3. They every single season you see different team owners playing the market in different ways, and they're really learning how to play it to a degree that is most beneficial to their team given their starting situation.
And you're absolutely 100% sure I can't interest you in a 24-hour locking period?
Yeah. I
Oh,
mean, if enough of people tell me 24 hours is good, maybe I'll look into it. But for the time being, I think that might be a little extreme. I don't want to kill my team owners.
well, I'll keep dreaming about it someday. Well, Gecko, do you have anything else before we call it?
I don't think so. I think we covered all the big things I wanted to cover today. Do you have anything you want to cover, Pony?
I think that I am all good. So with that, thank you all for listening to week 1 of the IBL official podcast. We have been Pony RL, Mass Marvelous in Memoriam, and Giant Laser Gecko.
Thank you for watching, everyone.
All right, see you next week. Next week, maybe. We'll
Hopefully.
see.